everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I am so glad that you found the time to be with us for this very, very special hour. There are many people to thank, and too many, in fact. Please note the slide that you saw and go to the website, glenbardgps.org, where you find our brochure of 50 programs, and on the back and the front, all of the sponsors who make these programs possible. We couldn't do it without them. And of course, we couldn't do it without you. We want you to know that everybody is welcome to the Glenbard Parent Series, cousins, family across the street or across the country. So please help us spread the word on social media, make a call, let others know. We are here every single week with weekly programming to benefit families, to inspire and engage everyone. I quickly want to tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Tonight is a kickoff to our Live Life Well Week. Our theme this year is staying positive. If it's raining, look for the rainbows. If it's dark, look for the stars. So Gina is helping us kick that off with this important conversation. Next week, we'll host once again, returning, we'll be hosting Josh Shipp, The Grown-Up's Guide to the Human Teenager. The topic that night is about every child is one caring adult away from being a success. His book, it's called Decode Their Behavior and Develop Their Trust. So come back next Thursday at noon or 7 p.m. With our commitment for early child education at the end of the month, we're going to welcome Dr. Iona Aruka. She will be talking about partnerships for real success. She will be in conversation with Dr. June Lee of Harvard and the Fred Rogers Institute, and Micheline Duclef and Bihari Porter, who's written the book Hunter, Gather, Parent, about parenting young children. So that should be an interesting conversation. And then we're going into March with by welcoming Jimmy Cassis. Live your excellence, bring your best self to work and home every day. He'll be with us 7 p.m. Thursday, March 2nd. Again, links that can be found at glenbardgps.org. I don't want to take any further time. This is an important conversation, and so we'll get right into it. I want to introduce Deb Cartwright. Deb is the assistant principal at Glenbard North Student Services. She has the honor of introducing a fan of hers and mine, Gina Biegel.
Thank you so much, Gilda, and good evening, everyone. Gina Biegel is a psychotherapist, researcher, speaker, and author that lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. She specializes in mindfulness-based work with adolescents. She is the founder of Stressed Teens, which has been offering mindfulness-based stress reduction for teens and individuals, families, schools, professionals, and the community since 2004. She is an expert and a pioneer of bringing mindfulness-based approaches to youth. And she's the author of numerous important workbooks, this one right here, my own copy, to benefit teens now. Gina provides worldwide multi-day trainings with intensive online workshops for teens and their families. Her work has been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Psychology Today, Reuters, the New York Times, and U.S. News and World Report. That's just to name a few. Her wellness curriculum is being used in physical educations in the Glenbard schools, and we are so delighted and honored to welcome her to our community today.
That was a very nice introduction, Deb. Thank you. I feel like I'm trying to look to see who you were talking about. I'm like, you were talking about me. That feels really strange, right? Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your busy lives to be with me and listen to what I have to share with you tonight. It doesn't benefit me to be on the West Coast because of the time difference when I'm speaking in the morning on the East Coast. But today it is a benefit to me because I'm glad it's not 8 at night for me on the East Coast or 7 on the Central time zone. So I am really happy to be here. I feel really honored and privileged to get this opportunity. So I want to share a lot with you today, and I will get through as much as I can and in as much depth as I can. You will have access to shortly in the chat area my PowerPoint and also a lot of the handouts that you see that I'll be going through on the slides that are actually skills or interventions that you can use with others will be made available to you as well. I am a person who loves to give resources, and I want you to be able to learn something tonight that you can use not only with others, but for yourself. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So I'd like to just, start by asking you, are you here right now? I know it sounds kind of like maybe like a silly question, because you're like, okay, yeah, I'm here, I'm listening to you, or I'm sitting here. But it's like, where is your attention? Like, are you thinking about your day, where you were right before this? Maybe you're doing multiple things at once right now, because you're listening to me, but maybe you're cooking dinner, or paying attention to something else. And the thing is that we're going to do that. We are human. But when we literally just ask ourselves that question, are you here right now? It's like, well, am I really fully present to myself, to my needs, to others, to the people I'm interacting with? When I have a conversation with someone, am I really being present? I think what people really want is to be seen and heard. When you think about all of the curriculum or content that you could share with someone, and I think what it really comes down to is our presence, right? Offering the gift of presence instead of giving the gift of a present. And so to be able to be present to others, it's also important to be present to ourselves. What I'd like to ask you to do is really just notice yourself right now. Maybe you don't feel good, and that maybe you feel great. Maybe you don't know how you feel. All of the above are fine, because how you feel is just how you feel in this moment. And the thing about moments is new moments come and they shift and change and pass. And what I love about moments is that every moment is a new opportunity to do something different. We get the opportunity to start our day over anytime we choose. Sometimes people will say, well, I'm having a bad day. And it's like, you don't have to wait till tomorrow to have a better day. You can choose to just think about where you are, be where your feet are, feel the earth under your feet, and take the opportunity to just tune in. Sometimes people think mindfulness practice requires a lot of time to set aside, and you can do that. A lot of my work is focused on mindfulness, and it still does. But it's like, people often will think you have to do it a certain way, you have to sit a certain way, do it for a certain period of time. And that's just not true. There's a lot of ways to be mindful and to engage in self-care practice and to take in the good that doesn't require a lot of time. And what I want to focus on when I'm working with people and in my daily life is not so much about the big moments, those, maybe going get a massage or taking a day off, or, going on a vacation. Those are kind of fewer and far between, but rather the many micro moments that often get missed and unused. So, just notice maybe the temperature in the room you're in. Notice, have your needs been met? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? HALT is a great acronym to think about. If you're hungry, trying to eat, because being hangry is no fun. If you're angry or anxious, just tune in to that. If you're lonely, trying to seek connection with someone that supports and nourishes you, sometimes that might be a pet. And if you're tired, to take a rest and maybe just take some downtime. I know we are often very scheduled and busy people, as well as our teams today. And it's important to know when we need to take a break, know when we need to turn the device off, or at least put it on do not disturb for a while. It can be a really nice reprieve to have that pause and space. I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. I think we all know what stress is. We all have an experience of what stress is, and stress is universal, and that if I say I'm stressed, you kind of understand what I'm saying, but it's also individual. How each person experiences stress is different. So how much something stresses me out versus the same situation to you is going to vary based on many factors: our history, our age, our experiences, what we ate this morning. All of those things are going to impact how something stresses us out or affects us. And stress is just basically defined is the brain or body responding to a demand or threat. It's a very primitive thing, stress. Stress is to let us know when we are not okay, to alert us that, hey, something is causing me some sort of discomfort and it's a demand on me that it's feeling too much. And it wants to be heard. It's like a pot of boiling water, if left unattended is going to overflow or boil over, or eventually it's going to burn out completely. So it's important to notice those kind of indicator lights that let us know that we are in stress, that we are in pain. Pain, like stress, is there for a reason. It's providing us with information. And it's actually a beautiful thing if you think about it, that it's trying to tell us, hey, alert us to try to get back to a balance, to our homeostasis. Two things that affect whether someone is stressed or not is about how they both appraise it and perceive it as stressful. I might appraise and perceive something as not very stressful, whereas someone else might consider it very stressful. Also, how I perceive the world and what I see from what I see and what you see is going to be vastly different. For example, if I'm on the beach and I'm enjoying the ocean, someone else might not be. Maybe they had a bad incident with water. That's scary to them. But for me, it's an enjoyable thing. And so each person is going to be different. And what we know based on looking at someone who might be smiling and might be pretending that they're enjoying something when really they're not. I think about social media and the posts that teens put of them smiling, and even in situations in which they're suffering inside or suffering in silence. And so it's just important to know that sometimes we don't necessarily know what's going on with someone by looking at them from the outside. Just briefly, there's this thing called the Urquhart-Dodson curve. It's created quite a while ago. I don't have the specific date. That's why I said quite a while ago, even though I write about this and talk about this all the time, it's just escaping me right now. I said this in my last talk. I always said I wanted to be a comedian, but I wasn't very funny. So I became a therapist instead in hopes that someone would think I was kind of funny. And so if you don't think I'm funny, then I'll stick with my day job as being a therapist. If you look back to my slide, I got distracted. I get distracted in every talk a little bit. That's just me. We are human. We are not perfect. That's part of this too, is accepting not only our talents and strengths, but our imperfections or our unique quirks and talents that make us us. So back to the slide. The idea with stress is that stress occurs and then it remits. So some amount of stress is good and even considered what we call eustress. Think about, people in sports who are trying to make a shot, the game-winning 3-point shot. You can imagine the adrenaline, the alertness, and that's where stress is actually hits this optimal point where you're just really performing it's helping you be productive and also helping you perform. Think about waiting to kind of the last minute to do something. Sometimes it serves you to get something done, but then sometimes you wait too long to get that thing done. You push it off too long, and then the stress and it gets to the point where then it becomes distress, and maybe you're not able to get the job done because you waited too long. That's just an example. The anxiety goes up, your health decreases. But the idea is that for most people, it remits and you go back to this baseline. With chronic stress or with people who experience, a lot of difficulty day in and day out, they really can't get back to that baseline. So the idea is that we want to get back to that baseline. We need that break, that reprieve, that reset. And when you are experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of adversities, a lot of adverse experiences, toxic stress, prolonged toxic stress, early life stress. I'm using all these words because it's interesting. I just finished a book on trauma and adversity. And when you look at all the language, there's all these big words for, adversity, trauma, and the like. And I find it interesting because what we're talking about here is that it's a person who really doesn't get back to that baseline. They are having to do more, work harder just to get to the same place as someone else to have an equal, they're not on an equal playing field, to be honest. And I think that's what's important to be honest about, is that people who people who experience a lot of adversities or trauma in their lives, are having a harder time to maybe do something than someone else who does not have that history or with them. But with that said, it isn't fixed. Just like our brain that is constantly changing, and we'll talk about neuroplasticity a little bit, that it is, we aren't fixed people, so that what we do every day can make a change, can make a difference. So you're not just stuck in a situation that you can't get out of. Now, here's the thing with teens and young people, they can't necessarily get out of that situation. When you're an adult and on your own, you get to have more choices, more freedom, and more control, and more of an agency to make certain choices that when you're younger, you don't. And so that is challenging, because you want to teach young people as best you can in the areas in which they can, how to have a sense of agency and control in their lives. Part of that is working with how they are with their emotions, how they are with their thoughts, meaning that a lot of times we all will add to our suffering, will add to our overall pain by making situations worse for ourselves. And so that's where taking in the good and some of the skills that I'll be sharing, what I call resource yourself, or resources, using resources or resourcing yourself, can help you to kind of combat some of these things that are difficult, help with stress, just even basic stress, but also help with stress that is more deleterious, that has been more chronic or is more chronic. When you're working with someone or interacting with someone, even if you're not in a professional capacity, just anytime you're interacting with another person, there are things that we don't see. We don't know what happened in their house the night before. We don't know their history. We don't know what's going on, the circumstances in their environment. These are things we can't see physically, right? We don't necessarily know what is happening for people. And what is really important with that is, just because someone might look okay on the outside and or is, performing within, what we call a normal range, meaning they're able to go to school and function in that capacity, doesn't mean they're okay. Sometimes people suffer in silence. Sometimes people don't. They will be more outward, their behaviors will be more of an outward difficulty or problem. Maybe they'll be engaging in self-harm that you'd see, self-harm behaviors, or doing things that bring attention to them. But there are other people in which that isn't the case. And so what I want is for us to look at people and giving them the benefit of the doubt, giving people the opportunity to understand that maybe things aren't okay, maybe things are going on for them that we have no idea. Also, to not kind of jump the gun on our assumptions or our judgments. You could think about this as an example. Let's say someone gives you this terrible stare, and you think it's about you and they don't like you. What if they just bit their lip and you happen to look at them right at that moment? And so the thing is that we don't necessarily know what's going on, right? And what is often the invisible thing is trauma, things that aren't seen. But in addition to trauma, you might call it a big T trauma, but you can also call it adversity. Many of us experience different types of adversity in our lives. And if you think about it, the pandemic has been an adverse experience for all of us. And that has caused some people traumatic response. It's been very challenging for them. And that's just a very, very significant example to use. But what is trauma? Trauma is basically providing us information like stress, like pain. Trauma is the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds a person's ability to cope with or handle it or manage it. And what is traumatic for me might not be traumatic for you, etc. And it's important when we're approaching people in our, with teens in our classrooms, in our therapy settings, in our community settings, however you're interacting with youth and other people, being mindful of what might be going on for someone, what possible adversity they might be facing that might be making it difficult for them to learn or difficult for them to be with you or work with you. And it's important to think about, when you're working with someone, creating a safe container, and creating a safe environment, being present to them, creating a relationship that provides them this kind of safe feeling with you, because they might not be getting that safety in other areas of their life. You might be that kind of one touchstone for them to really help them. And when you look at resiliency research, it states that basically if you have one person in your life that has been there for you, even if for a short period of time, that can be the shift in someone faring better in their adult years. I encourage you, when you're working with people and interacting with youth, to meet them where they're at, to not presume that one type of intervention is going to work for everyone, because it won't. And people are different learners. I'm an extremely visual learner. So you will see I have a lot of visual pictures and images on my slides because I really resonate with that. And so also trying to figure out what resonates with the people that you're interacting with. So give me 1 second. It's important to know what stress looks like in someone's life, what adversity looks like in someone's life. I just finished a book that's coming out in June on trauma and adversity. I think it is so relevant and important right now more than ever. I think it's important to think about the experiences youth have that impacts their health, wellness, and functioning. And thinking about it in kind of 4 different domains. What is the teen personally going through? Are they going through mental health issues? Are they having identity issues? What about their household environment? Who's in their house, and are they impacting this person, this teen, or you? Who's impacting you in your house or in your close romantic or relationships? And then also thinking about who's in the household, what's going on for them. Maybe parents are having difficulties in their finances, or maybe the makeup of their home is not the same as most people's, whatever that looks like. And so they're maybe dealing with things that others aren't, that make their experience different and make things more of a challenge in terms of them being able to access, self-care skills or positive coping skills, maybe if it's not modeled for them in their environment at home, and how we can teach them those things. And then also, what's the system in which they're in? And the pandemic is an example that is something that is affecting everybody's life, and has to some degree. And so it's a useful example. It's what is in each of our wider world that is impacting us. Why I share this is that it's important to know that when you look at adversity, all of us have some sort of adversity, and how can we change? How can we shift and change our stress, our health, our physical and mental health? And the thing is like I said, it's not fixed. We have the ability to change. We might not want to change because we can be set in our ways, but nonetheless, we do have the ability to change. And even young people who can't necessarily change their home environment or make certain choices, if their home environment isn't a supportive one, they are able to utilize resources to benefit themselves, even if they can't change other people, even if they can't change, certain things about their lives. Using resources is going to impact how they kind of fare on this, these scales. And you have this in your handout packet, so I won't go into it much further, but it's important to know that each person's unique, and each person experiences, stress differently, has different history and different narrative and stories that make up who who you are right now, and how you choose to take in the good of moments, how you choose to utilize beneficial moments that are unfolding for you every day can actually impact your health in significant beneficial ways. But with that said, we have to teach someone resources. We can't just expect them to know them. We can't expect people to know what self-care, teens to know what self-care is if we don't teach them. We can't expect someone to pay attention if we haven't taught them how. Just like we teach math and science, and we need to be able to teach basic social emotional learning skills, basic, ways to interact with one another and with ourselves. We want to choose to work with someone and interact with someone where they're at, based on what information we're given. We're not necessarily privy to all of the information about what's going on in someone's life, but if we meet them and offer them tools and tips and suggestions, where they're at is very important. It's hard you can't drive a car on empty. You can't, pour from an empty water bottle. You can't make a call on a cell phone that isn't charged. And we need to be aware of what our indicator lights on, letting us know that we kind of need servicing too. When you look at the continuum of functioning, those who are not doing well, maybe who are having a lot of difficulty, you want to, maybe suggest things to take care of themselves in the moment. You're not going to go, tell them to go meditate or do a mindfulness practice for 20 minutes when maybe they're having a lot going on in their mind. So if you ask them to sit in a practice, all they can think about is the challenges they're having. Maybe doing something more physical or more active might be appropriate. I like what I wrote on the bottom of this protective porcupine, is that sometimes in the moment, the best way to resource yourself is to protect yourself. So first and foremost, taking care of yourself. And that being said, making sure people are safe and secure and connected. Aside from, basic needs such as water, air, things we need to live, there are fundamental human needs for feeling safe, feeling satisfied, feeling connected to others. And it's often when we don't have one of these things, when they're missing, is when we notice them and when we need them. And sometimes we take for granted those things that are working for us and generally well until they're not. And so one way we can, really benefit ourselves is just really taking the time to stop and notice the things that are going right, the things that are serving us, the fact that I am here with you on a computer and we're all together in all different locations is pretty remarkable. And it's not that you're going to necessarily pay attention to that sort of thing every moment, or the fact that I have clothes, or the fact that I'm, drinking, I have tea to drink, whatever it is. It's these beneficial moments, if you notice them, if you stop and pay attention to them, actually are resources to yourself. They're ways in which you're kind of filling yourself up in a good and healthy way. Basically, you're providing yourself resources almost so that you're not feeling depleted or on empty. Resourcing yourself is the process of utilizing positive coping skills, healthy, safe coping skills that benefit your health, both physical and emotional health. So what are resources that are useful? When I think about it, I think about this bank. I call it the bank of well-being. We put in a perfect world, we put money away in a savings account for a rainy day, right? We're kind of taught to put money or coins in a piggy bank when we're kids. At least a lot of people I know, there really are a lot of options for piggy banks, by the way, like different kinds of banks. So I think about, what are the things you put in your bank, right? Do you put self-love in there? Do you put self-care, self-respect? Do you engage in mindfulness or gratitude? And all of those things really replenish you, allow you to reset, refuel, recharge, and allow you to, function every day. And when things are difficult, it's so much easier to tolerate if you've been taking care of yourself along the way. If you're on empty in your well-being bank and life really shows up, life, hits the fan, it's really hard to tolerate than someone who has been, taking care of themselves along the way. I provide you a blank to hand out for you to think about what are the things that resources that you can be using to fill up your well-being bank. And it might be a lot of the same things on the slide, but also for teens, it might be music, it might be their hobbies, it might be people in their life that fill them up. So you can use this in a lot of different ways to just really have people start thinking about all the things they can do that serve them, that nourish them, that support their well-being. Mindfulness is one of those resources, was one of those coins. Mindfulness is about being aware. It's about noticing, knowing what you're thinking as you're thinking it, being more in tune with what you're feeling emotionally. People, when I ask them what they're feeling, sometimes they'll say, I think I feel good. Well, that's actually a thought, not a feeling. And if you think about our feeling vocabulary, it's relatively limited, honestly. And so sometimes feeling isn't an emotion that you can just put your finger on it. Sometimes it's more about, I feel prickly, I feel cranky, I feel irritable, or, and helping someone to expand how they feel their feelings is useful. Sometimes people emote physically. And mindfulness is just about tuning in. It's about being aware, being present to how you're doing every moment, literally this moment, thinking about how are you? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? People often ask me, why is mindfulness so popular? Why is mindfulness so useful? Mindfulness, because of its utility of paying attention, allows you to notice what's in your environment. It allows you to notice the stimuli, what you can take in, what you see, the relationships you have with others, and also being present to yourself is part of that as well. And when you are more tuned in and checking in periodically with how you're doing and being mindful and engaging in activities more mindfully, you're going to be more present and more thoughtful, and often allowing for a response versus an automatic kind of impulsive reaction. A lot of times when someone is mindful and takes the time to notice, maybe, hey, my hands are, sweaty and I didn't notice that, or hey, my heart's, beating faster than normal. When you're aware of those things, it allows you to know, hey, maybe this isn't a good time to respond to that message I just got. Maybe that's a cue to me, that information that I need to take a space, take a break, take a pause. So it's very useful with teens in particular, because of that automatic reaction that so often happens with a teenage brain, with the prefrontal cortex not being fully developed. And also just the idea of us as teens, when we were teens, we thought we knew it all. We thought we were right. We thought that this was right now. And there wasn't a lot of thinking it through, playing that tape out. If I say tape out, teens are like, play the cassette out? What's that? So it's playing the movie through. There are times though where teens will know they're going to get in trouble for something they're going to do, but they do it anyway because they are willing to take that risk. But the intention here is to think about, how do I become more present to my life? How am I more present to those I'm working with? How can someone benefit from taking those microseconds maybe before they react and allow for a more thoughtful response? People will often ask me how to be mindful. One of the easiest ways to be mindful is to pay attention to any of your senses. If you're paying attention to any one of your senses, you are actually doing something in the present, which means you are mindful. Another thing too is you might say, oh man, I was trying to practice mindfulness, or I was trying to be mindful and I got distracted. Noticing you got distracted was actually an act of being mindful, because you noticed you weren't doing it. It's almost like when you're looking for something like your phone and you're holding it in your hand, or your glasses and they're on your head. We're imperfect people. So of course we're busy and we're doing things. And so we know how to be busy and to do and to go to the next thing. But a lot of times we don't just take that moment to just be. we know how to to strive. We know how to get to the next thing. What we need to do is kind of unwind that a little bit and to be here now and to just take a breath, take a moment, take that pause, check in with myself, figuring out what maybe I need and how do I get my needs met? And that doing so isn't selfish. When you're more mindful and more aware, or feel like you are paying attention more to how you're doing, you also can choose just as easily to, not just as easily, but you can choose to put your attention on negative things. And so the idea is to be selective with where you put your attention. Just because you're mindful, it doesn't mean you're going to be mindful of the good. You could be and I'm not saying you're only going to be mindful of the good. That's not it at all. You're going to be mindful of all moments, but sometimes we have this tendency to kind of attach to and pull toward the negative. And in fact, our brains do that automatically. And so it's so important for us to adjust, to notice when we're kind of going down that rabbit hole and on that track of kind of that negative train of thoughts, and really consider where we're putting our attention. And I believe, I didn't check this out, I believe Dan Siegel said, where attention goes, energy flows. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter who said it right now. I said that earlier. What matters is literally where you put your attention is where your energy is going to go. Think about, when you're spending time with people that nourish you, support you, and how you feel, versus when you spend time with people that get on your nerves, right? And so you can think about that. It's like maybe spending more time with people that benefit you, that serve you, that nourish you, if you have the choice. Not all of us do. If you're a young person in a home that is really demanding or strict or difficult, it's hard to get out of that. And so it's going to be even more important to kind of help provide resources and tools for someone in that situation. It's really important to consider where someone's putting their attention. Where are they putting their focus? You think about zooming in and zooming out on a camera, and even on your cell phone. And I encourage you to kind of go out and play with like taking a picture of the same thing zoomed out and zoomed in. And, the little intricacies of whatever it is you're taking the picture of, and then more of that landscape. And that's also how we work, right? Are we able to be in relationship with others where we can see our perspective, their perspective, the bigger picture? Or are we really focused on ourselves? Or are we really focused on the other person? And so this applies to our relationships as well. And I also find it interesting to pay attention to what catches your attention, when you're taking a walk, or when you're, when you're out and about and taking a picture, just pay attention to what catches your attention. And, maybe take a few pictures and just notice what there is to be, seen. Even, sometimes, I'm sorry, that picture is like very intense, right? So sometimes we might do the same thing 1,000 times, but I encourage you to look at it with fresh eyes. All right. So, when we talk about stress and when we talk about being mindful, it's important to, name what's going on in someone's life. You don't need to hide it away. And sometimes naming it can take some of the edge off it, take some of the pressure off of someone when you maybe really think about it, or even put it pen to paper, or even type it out depending on your preference. I love pen to paper, but so if you imagine yourself, this person in this boat is in a big storm, obviously. And what I think about is the waves here is like stress. So a lot of waves, a lot of stress. No, hardly any waves, not a lot of stress. And so it's a very useful way to get at what is going on for someone. And also using the word stress as an umbrella to make it safe to talk about adversity or depression or bullying or whatever it is that's going on for them that's actually causing the stress often will come out when you do this activity. So you have this in your handout that is been provided to you. And if you didn't get it, I know that the host will get it to you if you ask for it. but what I ask people to do is to draw their stress waves and label the waves with their stressors, their worries, their fears, things that are causing them some sort of concern. I'm going to show you a couple examples of teams. This one, I don't give direction except what you just saw on the previous slide, and I let people, interpret it and do with what they want when this is their practice, their experience. I encourage you to do it. I also encourage people to do this over different periods of time, because then you can learn how things shift and change, and how, like waves, our lives change every day, and what's important to us is going to be different in 2 weeks, and something might not even be on our radar anymore. We look at it and we're like, what does that even mean? So this teen wrote, school, driving, Spanish, journals, AP tests. This pretty common stuff. And then I noticed this one here, this big wave, it says house. And this teen was losing their home where they live, which is a huge stressor. And so you can get a lot of information by looking over with the team what they wrote. And also sometimes people themselves, when they do this, will notice things they hadn't even noticed. Sometimes what I find interesting is people will come up with their own kind of coping, their own resources, and their friends in their life is something that's helping them. And I found that very made me happy. That's very basic feeling, made me happy. This teen, unfortunately, made themselves drowning in the water. They put themselves in it. And, this person wrote final project, staying balanced, exceptional grades, not standing out, but doing something great, expectations, responsibilities, anxiety. There's just so much going on, right? And you can see that a lot of teens today actually might kind of fit into this, because they're doing so many things and they have a lot of pressures. And so it can feel like just a lot. And so being mindful, using resources can allow you to kind of take a step back and kind of get out of the waves. This one is more clinical in nature, and they drew it like a heart rate monitor and wrote body image, food, who I am, uncertainty, throwing up, self-control, what others think. This is evokes a lot of pain for me when I read it. And I've read this so many times. I've shared this. And so it can be a useful tool to really identify potentially what's going on with someone and something that they might not actually say to you. So talking about stress can be stressful, and people will say, well, maybe you don't want to bring that up. But the thing is those are the things that are going on in our heads and our minds and our thoughts and our feelings in our lives, even if they're not said. And at least this way they can be on paper. At least this way we can start to help someone tackle them. And I have people take the stressors they wrote, the things or whatever it is they wrote on their handout, and place them into 3 categories. Basically things that are short-term, acute, manageable in the first column. And basically these are things that with some sort of effort they'll resolve. It might be to-do listy items. Middle are things that might be chronic, something maybe like an illness you can't change. But with some sort of effort and steps and planning, it might resolve, or at least your relationship to it might change. And then the last category are things that are really enduring and or mostly unmanageable. And this would be things that you can't necessarily change, that are out of your control. You can't necessarily, teens can't control necessarily where they live or the things that they do sometimes. And so for them, they're going to have a different list than we would. But another thing would be, the pandemic. We couldn't, that was something that was unmanageable and we could not control. However, how we handle it, what we do, how we resource ourselves, and how we have a relationship with the difficult and unmanageable stressor is different, can be in our control. When you think about waves and fierce waves or calm waves, what is interesting is thinking about, dropping an anchor from a boat. And when you drop an anchor, its purpose is to hold that boat in place. And when you think about dropping our own anchors, grounding ourselves to this moment, tuning into how we're doing, what are the things that allow us to be held in place? What are our, things that really ground us? And whether it's mindfulness practice or self-care or connecting with a friend or photography or whatever hobby, some just using these as examples. What's interesting about water and waves, even when it's fierce on the surface, when you drop farther below the surface of the water, it's often calm and still. And I find that so interesting. It's like, how do we get to this still, quiet place in the midst of maybe a lot of noise, a lot of stress on the surface? When you look at our brain and neuroplasticity and our brain's ability to change, because of our ancestry and because of our just our chemistry, we are wired actually to look out for the negative, to protect ourselves. And so when you attend to the negative, it's negative begets more negative. It's almost like a tumbleweed that gets bigger as it's going. So we have this negative selection bias, this negative tendency in our mind, in our brains. And we have bad experiences can turn into negative imprints on the brain, but they don't have to. We have the opportunity every day to adjust and shift how we see the world, how we interact with the world and ourselves, and be present. It doesn't mean there aren't bad circumstances or experiences in someone's life or something that's stressful. It's what we do with it, how we are in it, how we, resource ourselves during those times that allow us to not make those negative imprints. And what we can do is that we can actually shift that negative tilt to the positive. And we can do that by active effort, by choosing to attend to things that serve us when they arise. When beneficial experiences happen in our lives, when we notice things that serve us in some way and we attend to them, we are fighting against that tendency to the negative. Donald Hebb says, neurons that fire together wire together. And neuroplasticity is this ability of our brain to change by creating and reorganizing neural connections in response to learning or experience. And so we have the ability to create 1,400 new neurons a day, depending on what we do, how we, if we're interacting with other people, if we're learning something new, if we're engaging in something pleasant. And what's fascinating is that our brain actually wants to soak up positive experiences, beneficial, pleasant experiences. And so positive neuroplasticity is the process of the brain changing in response to experiences, particularly with regard to positive or pleasurable ones. So by focusing and tilting toward that positive, you're helping positive neural connections grow. You're helping fight against that negative selection bias that we all have. And taking in the good is this action of engaging in positive neuroplasticity. It's really attending to savoring sweet moments, even mini moments, though. It doesn't have to be like this grand moment. It can be these just life moments. It's like, what are just something that's beneficial to you this moment that you can take in and notice. And by taking it in and noticing it, by savoring it, by attending to it, but also just even recognizing that it exists, you are engaging in positive neuroplasticity. Positive neuroplasticity is about paying attention to things maybe for 12 seconds, 6 to 9 times a day. Research supports that we can shift that negative tilt to the positive when we engage in just attending to things that serve us, these micro moments, just what are beneficial things? The fact that I have a cup that I have tea and I'm happy with that, and noticing that, savoring the sweetness or the flavor of the tea, for example. To keep a fire going, you need resources and beneficial experiences in your life. You need to attend to them. You need to notice them. You need to add to them. You need resources just like you would a fire. And so I've come up with an acronym HOT. Fire is hot, and it's have or go and create a beneficial experience, open to the beneficial experience, and take it in. And what that means is notice something that's enjoyable, pleasant, pleasurable, or beneficial as it's happening. And if you aren't able to do that, to literally go and create a beneficial experience. So literally, okay, I'm going to take a sip of this tea and I'm really going to actively notice it for 12 seconds, 30 seconds. And while I'm having a beneficial experience, opening to it. noticing my senses, having sense awareness, noticing my thoughts about it, my feelings perhaps about it, and then taking it in, like savoring the sweetness, thinking about how water gets absorbed into a sponge. Taking in the good not only serves you in the moment, but it creates that, something as a resource for later. Again, if you're taking care of yourself along the way, if you're noticing things that serve you along the way, then you're going to be able to tolerate things that are more difficult. It's important to engage in self-care. It's important to tell people and teach people what self-care is. Self-care is giving attention to and engaging in ways that support your physical and psychological well-being and your health. Self-care, talking about ways that you can engage in it. How do you cultivate it every day? And I'm going to show you an example soon. Thinking about ways that maybe meeting someone where they're at, as I said before, maybe it's having downtime. Maybe it's the self-care is actually taking a nap. Maybe it's getting distracted because things are too difficult and there are healthy distractions. Maybe, it's watching Netflix. Maybe it's, taking the time to make a good meal. It is meeting the needs at the time, matching where someone's at is what you want to ask someone to do. It's important to care for yourself as well as, if not more than you would your phones. Ariana Huffington says we take better care of our smartphones than we do ourselves. And unfortunately, that might be true at times, right? We charge it. We have these indicator lights on our computers, on our phones, on our cars when something needs to be done. We have indicator lights too. Our indicator lights are stress. Our indicator lights are pain, but sometimes we don't attend to them. Sometimes we don't want to notice them. Sometimes we make our problems worse by not noticing them. And so how do we engage in self-care? How do we engage in filling up our battery, so to speak, charging, refueling, and recharging? And so what I like to do is talk about levels of self-care. So you do have this in the handout packet I provided, but you can also just fold a piece of paper and four. And what I like to do is think about levels of self-care, because a lot of times people think of self-care as a vacation or a whole day, out in nature, or, a big event, so to speak. And those are wonderful, but they're often fewer and far between versus things you can do every day that let you, engaging in ways to show you that you matter. And that self-care is showing you that you matter. It's important to model self-care. When you engage in it, you are showing others too that it's important to do so and how to maybe do it. Sometimes an act of self-care is saying no. Sometimes an act of self-care is setting boundaries. And those can be really hard to implement. And sometimes it's challenging to engage in self-care because it might feel selfish, and it's not. The heart pumps blood to itself first before the rest of the organs of the body because it knows that's what it needs to do to survive. So back to the levels of self-care. What are things in level 1? Easy peasy things. What are things from 1 minute to 15 minutes that you can do every day? Doing one, whether it's having a texting or calling or videoing a friend, having a cup of coffee, paying attention to a pet in your life. I'm a pet lover, so it always comes to my mind, watering your plants. Level 2, what are things that you can do that are 30 minutes to 2 hours, that is self-care for you? Maybe it's watching a comedy, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's doing yoga, whatever it might be for you. Level 3, what are things that you can do that when you say you're doing nothing? None of us really do nothing. What is it we do when we're doing nothing? And sometimes that's what we need to do, is to take a day off or take a half a day off if our schedule and life allows. Some of us aren't necessarily privileged to do so. And so that is important to consider too. And then lastly, level 4 is spending time with people that nourish and support us. I always find it interesting when I have teams write names of people down in this section, because in this quadrant, because sometimes they'll put people down that I know aren't necessarily a good fit for them, but yet they'll still, that's the person they always get in trouble with. And I'm like thinking, why are you putting this person down? It's like, didn't the person you got in trouble with a few weeks ago? So it is also information for us. All of this is information for us too. I like to think about the things that we engage in that can be self-blank. So self-care, self-respect, self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-compassion. There's a lot of self-words. And what I want to do is promote those and reduce self-harm and self-destruction and self-loathing, you know, and nurture these other self-words that are so useful and important. I really encourage people to engage in healthy and safe coping skills. I will ask people to, I ask people to engage in positive coping skills or healthy and safe coping skills. And the thing is if they don't know what they are, again, how can they engage in them? So I have a list of 25. They're in the packet. They're on my website on the homepage. There's 25 here. I love this because it's a quick go-to list. But then I also have 100 lists. So over the years, I have these, you know, like one of them is don't believe everything you think. And honestly, people will often be like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That every thought I have doesn't mean I have to believe it. So it can be, one sentence can be very powerful. And so these are kind of like my little nuggets of little things that I think are useful. And I encourage you to share with all people, not just youth. All of the stuff I've shared, I think applies to all of us. And it's important for us to also model what we're asking of youth to do, of teens to do. On my website, stressteens.com, I have a ton of free resources all over my pages. But the Stress Teens Toolbox is particularly a page where everything on there is free resources. Next week, I'm actually starting a new 10-week training, certificate training, where you can get credits. And I'm also starting a 4-week teen and young adult group, online group in my program. And you have a coupon code that gives you $100 off. I've written a lot of books, and depending on your interest, needs, or wants, they might be of interest to you. I'd love to thank you for your time today or this evening, and hope that something was of benefit to you tonight.
That was the fastest hour that I can remember, because there was so much wonderful information there, Gina. We're going to go right to the questions right here. If you're on empty, or you think someone you care about is on empty and life already hit the fan, where do you start when you feel like you're in quicksand and there's no time machine?
Basics, really getting to basics. I think about that acronym I said, HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We don't make good decisions when we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We are more vulnerable. We are more irritable. We are less responsive and more reactive. So one is to consider, are you any of those 4 things? And if you are, to maybe shifting to work on getting food, work on connecting with people if you're lonely, if you're tired, taking a nap. Also just getting our basic needs met. Also really quick is compassion. Like sometimes you're empty, and acknowledging you're empty, acknowledging what you need is important. This is not some fancy therapy I'm going to mention, but I like this example. Let's say every day you wake up and you have a certain amount of spoons. Let's say you have 12 spoons, literal spoons, you know, that you use to eat, utensils. Each of those spoons is a certain amount of energy. And when you're out of spoons, you got no more energy left. And some days you might only have 2 spoons. So you're going to be really careful with how you use them. Some days you might have 20 spoons. So you're jamming. And that's where it's so important to meet someone where they're at. If you ask someone who's really struggling to do a lot of self-care, that's hard. You want to ask them to focus on that level 1, maybe taking a shower, standing outside and just noticing the sun. When you're feeling miserable, the last thing you want to do are things that are good for you, and they're the most important things that you need to do. And so also modeling what you're wanting from someone else is important.
Beautiful. As we're coming to a close here, and you spent a whole day with us, and I'm so very grateful, and you're so generous that we can post this on our Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel. Thank you so much. What's one final thing that you want students to know and parents to know?
That love isn't conditional. And I did say that on my other talk earlier today. A lot of times it's important to separate how you feel about someone and what their actions, their behaviors. And even when you're frustrated with someone, having tolerance with love and compassion, and, you know, supporting someone even when they're really driving you crazy. And you know what, can you ask me your question one more time? Because I got distracted.
I mean, that's really an important thought. A parent needs to know that it's not conditional on a behavior, on a grade, on an action, that it's there. That is your child needs you and deserves you. One thing that you want kids to know that couldn't be here tonight, that may not see this, what's one thing we should be sure that we share with our children?
That it's not selfish to take care of yourself. That it is rigorous to have, be rigorously honest with yourself and knowing, give me a second.
Okay, take your time.
Yeah. It's hard, one thing, but there's so many things. I think considering why you're doing what you're doing when you make decisions, your intentionality, your reason for what you're doing, and to honor your needs, honor where you're at, honoring what your body's telling you, what your mind's telling you, and listening to it. And I think that honestly, a lot of times our gut intuition is really where we should come from, our and also our heart space, as well as our thinking space, our thought space, our head space. Thank you. I was trying to talk to myself, what am I thinking about here? It's the head space. It's not being all the time up here, but listening to what our body's telling us. It provides us so much information that we often don't pay attention to. That's the pain that we experience, the stress that we experience. It's information that's saying, hey, I need attention, I need recharging, I need refueling, I need resetting.
So we can take in the good.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be over the top fireworks moments. It's taking in the good of moments that unfold throughout our day that serve us and are a benefit to us.
One question before I look at the chat here. You're in an elevator with a teenager, and what's the one thing you want them to know? And the same thing for the caregivers. So what's you have to know this.
You're enough. You're enough right now, just as you are. We're often trying to be someone else. And your question caught me off guard, though, by the way. I had not prepped that. And I think that would be it. There's such a need to be perfect or have this, we're never good enough. And it's if we're always kind of searching for that enough up here, we're never going to be right here. And so I'd say you're enough. And I'd also say be where your feet are, because sometimes we're so up here that we just need to, I literally got goosebumps saying that. It's literally touch the ground. You're here right now. You don't got to be everywhere else. You don't got to be what you got going on in the rest of the day or what happened before. Just be here right now.
And same for a parent. You've got a parent in the elevator, and what would you say to them?
I would say, honestly, don't put your stuff on them. Know your own stuff, do your own work, do your stuff. Notice if the way you're interacting with them is because of your own stuff, your own mood, or if it's because of what's going on in your relationship with them. And it's just whole, having boundaries, being aware of when they get kind of intertangled. And wait, one more thing for parents, love is not conditional. No matter how annoyed you are with your son or daughter, love them. Tell them you love them. My mom used to put little notes on a napkin in my lunch, and I love those notes. Love notes don't have to go away. And just because yesterday was Valentine's Day, you can turn love notes every day and just say, or even not even a love note, but letting them know what it is you care, what about them makes them awesome. Reminding them that they are enough with their gifts and talents, and or just some cute little heart or smiley face or something stupid, and they'll be like, oh, that's stupid. They still like it.
Exactly. I so agree with you. I'm going to take this question, if you will. Do you have resources you can recommend for the tweens between ages 10 and 12? I specifically have a child with autism, anxiety, and ADHD.
My stress reduction workbook, I think if you're working with someone, would be just fine and appropriate. I don't have, honestly, I think if you'd like to email me training@stressteens, I could answer your individual question if I had a little bit more context to answer it.
So kind of you, so generous. I think about what GPS is, and it's, I think about Madeline Levine, who talked about how love the child in front of you, not the child that you hoped for, imagined, dreamt about, expected, that child. But I'm going to add that to my list of what is GPS. Love is not conditional, and they so deserve every bit of us, don't they?
Absolutely. But we also deserve ourselves. We deserve to offer ourselves that love too. It's really hard to show true love and honest, unconditional love if we're putting conditions on ourselves. So it's definitely both. I think it's a dual relationship, like our relationship with others, but also our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, that's well said. That is so true. We can't give it if we don't get it. And if we fill our vessel so we can do that.
You can't pour from an empty water bottle.
Right. Beautiful. So, you left us with, what information for the teens, information for the caregivers. I guess, those teachers, those social workers, it's all very much the same. I love what you said. You are enough. Let's take care of ourselves so we can give it away to others. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you
so much, everybody. You have a wonderful day. Come back soon, everybody. Thank you,
Bye.
Gina. Take care.